about saving and investing and all those things is that you save up for, you save for retirement. Everyone knows you're supposed to save for retirement and put money away and save it and grow it for retirement. And then we view retirement, like the day you retire, as the finish line. Like that's what you're saving for. That's what all this work went into. And you get there and yeah, you made it. You retired. But that's not the finish line. At best, that's, mile marker 13.1 in a marathon. You've got 2-3 decades left to live after that point. And that whole time, you are going to need an income, right? We work 30-40 years and pay all of our bills based on an income that keeps coming in. And you're still going to need that when you retire. And in the same way that while we're working, the cost of everything that we need and want to buy continues to go up. Right, we've all experienced that a lot over the last few years.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Money Talk. I'm Johnny, and today we have Mr. Freeman Linde. He's a certified financial planner. And Mr. Linde, could you introduce yourself and kind of tell a little bit of background about yourself to the audience?
Yeah, John, thanks. Appreciate you having me on. Yeah, my name is Freeman. I'm a certified financial planner, as you mentioned. I actually didn't know a lot about money growing up, other than, that it was a good thing to save and whatnot. But I first got hooked on money when someone recommended, and I listened to the audiobook of The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And so I just started listening, and I was hooked, and I listened to the whole thing in one sitting. And I was like, man, it's really cool when you know what you're doing with money and, just know what to do and have the motivation and inspiration to do it. And so I eventually, decided to go into that career. I enjoyed talking about it so much with people, enjoyed helping people with their finances. And so just decided to kind of marry that passion with some of my skills and go into financial planning. Started off, didn't know it, kind of more on the insurance side of the business. That's not really what I wanted to be doing. And I wanted to be doing planning and just helping people with what they needed to do without kind of a bias towards one strategy or another. So eventually ended up launching my own firm. So, because you can't if you can't find a place where they're doing it the way you want to do it, then just start it yourself, right? So
yeah.
Started my own firm and doing that for a few years now. And it's just been really fun to continue to help change people's lives and to do it in a way that I think is the right way to do it and really positive. And so yeah, it's been a great journey, and it's always great when you can really, marry what you're passionate about with then doing that for a living. So it's been a good journey.
Totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with that. If you can find your passion and put it together with what you like to do, you got a hit run there, home run. So I understand that you're an author too. I think it's the 3D retirement income. Could you tell us a little bit about your book and where can you find it?
Yeah. So yeah, I wrote a book, partly just to convey to my clients a little bit more information than I had time to talk about in person. And then partly just to reach a wider audience, because I can only help so many people personally. And I think some things we talk about, more people need to hear. And so one of the common myths, I think, about saving and investing and all those things is that you save up for, you save for retirement. Everyone knows you're supposed to save for retirement and put money away and save it and grow it for retirement. And then we view retirement, like the day you retire, as the finish line. Like that's what you're saving for. That's what all this work went into. And you get there and yeah, you made it. You retired. But that's not the finish line. At best, that's, mile marker 13.1 in a marathon. You've got 2-3 decades left to live after that point. And that whole time, you are going to need an income, right? We work 30-40 years and pay all of our bills based on an income that keeps coming in. And you're still going to need that when you retire. And in the same way that while we're working, the cost of everything that we need and want to buy continues to go up, right? We've all experienced that a lot over the last few years. That's going to keep happening even in retirement. And so where a lot of people think that that's kind of the finish line, you need to grow to a certain point, and then you're supposed to protect your money and keep it safe. We teach that you have to keep growing that money and keep growing that income throughout retirement, and that you need to make sure that thing is matching and exceeding that increase in the cost of living. And so we kind of break that down into 3 different modes that we talk about and kind of go into some more detail in the book. But that's kind of the basic premise and the basic myth that we're trying to address in that book.
Wow. That sounds pretty awesome there. Where can listeners find your book?
Yeah, so you can get it, it's on Amazon, it's on Audible. I personally I like to consume a lot of books, but who's got time to read, right?
Yeah,
But everyone's got time to listen to stuff, right? Everyone's
absolutely.
listening to this right now, right? So we
Yeah.
have time to do that. We're driving around. I don't recommend reading a book while you're driving, but you can listen to one. So I do all my stuff in audio, so I made sure we got it on Audible as well. And I also know that not everyone can afford or wants to afford to buy a book. So we also give it away for free
Oh,
on
wow.
my website. I got a lot of my education for free from libraries and those types of things. So yeah, you can, I've got a podcast and a kind of an educational side of my business called Retire Mentorship. It's retirement and mentorship put together, and so you can always request a copy on there. We'd be happy to send one to anyone who wants one.
Wow. Well, Freeman, what's your website? Because we make sure we put that in the notes.
Yeah, so it's retirementorship.com.
Okay.
And the idea is that we want to be your mentor to and through retirement. Because I think, it's one thing to get a good idea and to maybe start it, but life goes on, life gets busy. It's easy to forget the things we're supposed to be doing. It's easy to lose track of where we're going and some of the things that we remembered. And so that's why, things like Money Talk, like this podcast here, things that we're trying to do, like just to be able to reinforce some of that stuff over time to teach you new things, but also to remind people of the things they already know. My pastor, my church often says we need to be reminded more often than we need to be taught. That you only need to be taught things one time, but we're going to forget it, and so to keep being reminded to keep on the path is important. So that's what our podcast is about, and so that's why I'm glad that you guys have this podcast and those types of things to keep people on the straight and narrow and keep reminding people what they should be doing.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because sometimes you're right. You can be taught, but through the trials of life and through the things that you do in life, you can also forget what you're taught. And so a reminder is always helpful to kind
Yep.
of remember some of those things that you've been taught, so you can apply them to your life. And when you apply them, then you get the fruits of what you applied.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
so I noticed too when I was looking at some of your information that it says that you are a fee-only fiduciary financial planner. Could you tell the audience what is a fiduciary?
Sure. Yeah. So fiduciary is a big fancy word for doing what's in the best interest of the client. So the way I like to describe it is let's say that you and I are working together, that you didn't know all this stuff about finance, that you were looking for a financial advisor, someone to help you. And so you're going out to Google something, you meet with the first guy that comes across. And so the financial advisor's digging into your situation. You realize you need some help in this area, that, and so he comes up with a couple of solutions. He comes up with a plan A and a plan B. And plan A is good for you, and it pays him a lot of money, pays him a really big commission if you were to go with plan A, and it is good for you. But plan B is way better for you. It's like the best thing you could possibly be doing, but it doesn't pay him nearly as much. There's two standards that this financial advisor might be working under. One is a fiduciary standard, and the other one is called a suitability standard. And that one
Okay.
means that as long as something's suitable for you, as long as it's good for you, they can recommend it. So in that case, right, he might look at these two things and say, well, hey, they're both good for Johnny, but this one pays me way more. So I'm just not even going to tell him about the other one. I'm just going to recommend plan A because it's good for you and it pays me a lot of money. That's suitability. But you don't want something that's just good for you. You want something that's the best for you, right?
Absolutely.
And as a fiduciary, then fiduciaries are required to, by law, only recommend what's in your best interest, the very best thing for you. So even though plan A may pay me a lot more money, I have to recommend plan B to you because it's better for you. And I think when most people hear that, they're like, well, duh, isn't that the way it should be, right? Doesn't everybody want recommendations in their best interest? And yeah, I think that's what everybody wants. I just don't think enough people know the difference between those two things. And so, people often will ask then, well, how do you know if you have a fiduciary or suitability financial advisor? And I think the best way to find out is to just ask them how they're paid, right? If they get paid, if you're not directly paying them, then they're a suitability advisor. They're getting paid by commissions from the companies that they work for, right? If they say, well, I get paid in two ways, I get paid by the company when I give you certain products, and I get paid by you giving me referrals, or some can line like that, or whatever else, then that they're being paid by commission, and therefore that's a pretty good incentive then to recommend only the products or services that pay them the highest commission. But if you are paying them a fee, right, either out of your bank account, or there's a specific fee coming out of your investment account or whatever else, then people who are getting paid a fee, they are required to act in your best interests with those things. And then there's one final layer to this, if you don't mind. And that is that there's some people that call themselves a fiduciary because they're a fiduciary in some things, right? They'll manage your investments for a fee. And so when they're giving you investment advice, they're being a fiduciary. But when they're recommending insurance products or annuity products, then they're acting as representative of the company, and they don't have to be a fiduciary for those types of things. And so, but since they're a fiduciary in some things, they can legally call themselves a fiduciary. And so that's the fee only part of the tribe that I'm a part of, is that fee only financial advisors only get paid a fee. And that means everything that someone like me would tell someone to do, you can trust, and that that's always in your best interest. And I'm not switching hats between suitability and fiduciary. And there's a lot of us out there, but we make up like about 1% of the total financial advisors that are out there on the market. And so I didn't even know about that. It took me like 5 years of being in the industry before I even knew that was a thing. And if you can be in the industry for 5 years and not know the difference, like there's no way that most people know the difference between those things. And so I think it's always worth pointing out to people, I think.
No, you're right, because I could see you going to sit down with an advisor or with a plan or whatever, and that would be one of the questions you wouldn't even think about asking. Are you a fiduciary or use a suitability planner? What would you, and then what if they don't even tell you and you don't know those signs that you just said to kind of look for, to kind of say, hey, well, he don't have my best interest or she don't have my best interest at heart, so maybe I need to look for somebody else. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a lot. And then on the insurance side, so if they switch and they start talking about insurance products, how would you identify that? Is that automatically they're gonna be representing that company usually, or is it maybe they are also a fiduciary that can represent the insurance products as well? How does that work?
Yeah, so like for us, for someone like me who's a fee only fiduciary, I give recommendations on insurance all the time. I just don't personally provide the insurance.
Got it.
Right. So if you need, right, if you got some young kids, right, like I do, I've got 2 little girls, another one on the way. Like I need life insurance because if something happens to me, I want to make sure they're taken care of. And same with any other young family that I would meet with, right? Like you need it based on all your situations. Here's the amount that you need, and here's a couple places that I trust that you could go out and get it. But I don't sell it to you. I don't make a commission on recommending that insurance or disability or whatever else. And so that way you can trust that, hey, this person's not just recommending insurance because they're going to get a commission off of it. They're recommending it because it's just something that you need, right? And I think that if anyone is actually then providing the insurance themselves, at that point, they are automatically representing the company that they are promoting the insurance from and are not acting as a fiduciary in that standpoint. Now, there are definitely some advisors out there who are true fiduciaries, right? They really only do act in the best interest of their client. Even if they do also provide some insurance, they only recommend the good stuff. They don't recommend universal life or whole life or any of that garbage. And so like you can find some true fiduciaries that are not fee only. I just think it's hard, and it's hard to know which one you got, right? And that's why I like being part of that official fee only crowd. Like you can find me at like feeonlynetwork.com. It's a big listing of basically all of them that are out there in the nation. And so I think like if you're someone who's like, yeah, I don't like to be sold, or maybe you have an advisor already, right? And like every time you meet with them, they're trying to get you to buy more whole life, and you're just always fighting them off, and you're just like sick of that. Then going there and finding someone from that category is just an easy shortcut to make sure that you're getting someone who's fee only, who's a fiduciary all the time on everything they talk about, and you don't have to worry about them selling you some junk that you don't.
Nice. Yes. That's nice. That's very nice recommendations there, Freeman. So I know you keep saying the fee only, but is there a difference between like fee only and like fee based? Is there a difference between that? And then if so, what are the differences?
That's a great clarification. So yeah, a lot of people will then, and yeah, right. You would read that online. Like if you were reading my profile one week, you say, oh, he's fee only, and then a couple weeks later, you're reading the profile of someone else, and you're saying, oh, he's fee based. Like in your mind, you would just think that was the same thing. You wouldn't even remember that tiny tweak at the end there. So fee based basically means that some of the work that they do is for a fee, and they would be a fiduciary on them. The most common being, of course, that they manage your investments for a fee, and so they are a fiduciary on your investment. But then they also give you insurance recommendations that they're not paid a fee on, they're paid a commission on. And so then they're only fee based, whereas fee only means you only get paid a fee, and there's no additional commissions, no kickbacks. They're even the association that I'm a part of, that officially registers fee only advisors. They're so strict on that. Like even like my wife, if my wife was an insurance agent, I couldn't be called fee only, right? If my brother worked in the insurance industry, I couldn't be called fee only, because I could, I could say that I'm fee only, but then secretly be recommending you to my wife, and all the money's still coming back to the same pot. And so, you could get around that. But they want like several layers in, no commissions, no kickbacks, no incentives, so that everything that we're recommending, is 100% in your best interest, because there's no ulterior motives there. So yeah, they're pretty strict on that whole fiduciary standard and the fee only.
Wow. So even if your wife was like an insurance agent, you wouldn't be considered a fee only fiduciary planner.
Yep.
Wow. I did not know that one. Wow.
It's pretty layered, and they really want to make sure that they're protecting the fee only name and who's a part of that, and that they're only letting a certain crowd of people into that.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, that's good information to know. So if you're out there and you decide to say, okay, I want to talk to I want to find a financial advisor, and you're not sure how to go about finding that advisor, what are some of the questions that you think someone should ask to actually find that financial advisor to make sure they're getting the right fit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone should, honestly, like I always encourage people to interview more than one advisor, because like frankly, I'm not right for it, right? Like there's certain people that I'm going to jive really well with, that I like working with. They like working with me. They agree with my philosophies, those types of things. And so we're going to be a really good fit. And that's not just going to be true of everyone. So I will, if someone comes to me, I will actually always encourage them to go out and interview at least two more. Most people, right, they spend more time planning how they're going to spend their weekend than they do planning their entire financial future, or vetting someone that they're going to trust to plan their whole financial future for them.
Right.
And so we should always be evaluating, spend some good time. I know it's a lot of work, but the right person is going to make you and save you way more money than you're ever going to pay them. And the wrong person could cost you way more money than if you'd never worked for them in the first place. And so it's a big decision, I think, and it should be taken, seriously. And so we have a list of questions that like people come in and like, if they don't have any questions, we'll just like, well, here, you should ask these ones. And some of them are like, right, what are all the ways that you get paid? Not how do you get paid, because they might just give you the one way that they're happy to admit that they get paid that way. But if you ask them what are all the ways that you get paid, then they have to disclose whether they're paid by commission or whether they get kickbacks or whether they get finder's fees or those types of asking them if they have any specialties, right? Because someone who's just about to retire and is looking at Social Security and Medicare and unwinding their retirement into a retirement income, like their situations are way different than someone who just got their first job with a little signing bonus. They're about to move into a house, their first kid's on the way, right? Totally different life circumstances. And so maybe you want somebody that specializes in your stage of life, or you work for a very specific company that's got very advanced benefits. You want to work with someone who understands stock options and all those types of things, right? So asking about specialties. And then I always think like it's good to ask like, hey, is there a way that you're going to prove that you can demonstrate that you know what you're talking about, or do I just have to take it at face value? And they should have some way that they can demonstrate those things. Asking what's your investment philosophy, because people have different ones. And I'll just say this too, right? If their investment philosophy is, well, hey, we have you take a risk tolerance questionnaire, and then we invest you based on your risk tolerance. Basically what that is they'll give you a 10-question questionnaire. It takes you 5 minutes to complete. And then your entire financial future will be based on that one little survey. They'll stick you in some default portfolio that's based on whatever number that generated. But how you answer those questions when you're sitting in a cushy office is way different than how you might actually act those things out in real life, right? So when it asks you on that form, hey, what would you do if the value of all your investments dropped by half? You might say, oh, nothing, I would just stay invested, no problem, when that's not happening. But when you actually see your money get cut in half, that's a way different experience, right? And so does nothing to answer these questions. All it is a cover your butt for the investment companies that, you know, if you get mad because you lose money investing with them, you can't come after them because you filled out a risk tolerance questionnaire. And so now they say, well, we just invested you based on what you said you want. And so they do nothing. They're not accurate. They don't help you at all. And you're just going to get put in some cookie cutter portfolio for people like you. And so, like, if that's all they're doing, right, again, if they're spending 5 minutes to decide your entire financial life, again, that's just not enough time, right? If they're not explaining what it is, like if you went to a hospital, right, and you're like, man, I don't know, I don't feel well, doc. I got some symptoms. And they're like, well, hey, take this little questionnaire, and based on that, we'll write you a prescription and send you on your way. And you're like, wait, you're not going to like do any tests? You're not going to ask me any questions? You're not going to explain any of this stuff? Like, they wouldn't do that, right? They're gonna take your heart rate. They're going to take all these things to make sure that they diagnose it correctly. And then if they're good, right, they're going to take some time to explain why they're prescribing the treatments that they're prescribing, and then walk you along to make sure that you get them all done correct. They're not just going to give you a survey and then give you some drug. And I think that's a lot of the ways that people do it. So, you know, asking people what their investment philosophy is, making sure that they're taking that time to teach you what you really need to know to be a successful investor, to be successful with your finances, you know, and that's why, I mean, honestly, I think some of like just the financial coaches out there are better than some financial advisors, because they way more often will take that time to actually explain concepts to people and teach them and coach them, rather than just writing a prescription for some drugs and trying to get the next one. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of questions like that I think are good. And if you ask the same questions to all the advisors that you're interviewing with, you can start to see some patterns, some differences, and some things that really jive with you. And then you can make a better selection from that point. So I did a whole podcast episode on that, and people can find that list of questions that we ask. It's just it's 5 questions to ask your financial advisor. And so I think it's like retirementorship.com/5, like the digit 5. And, people can do that, or you can always Google, you know, questions to ask a financial advisor. There's lots of lists out there.
Yeah, that's pretty good, because I would tell you, when you're first starting out, especially when you're looking for an advisor, that's one of the things you're not sure about. You know, you might go to one and say, "Oh, this the fit for me. I'm just going in," and you don't know anything. And you're right, you wind up getting the cookie cutter investment portfolio, and then later on you're like, "Well, I don't really like this, and now I'm kind of in this. What do I do to get out of it?" And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you feel like you're all kind of lost, and because you didn't get the right fit. So listeners, if you heard what Freeman said, make sure if you're looking for an advisor, you ask the right questions, because the questions matter when it comes to your money, right? You want to have your money, and you want your money to grow for you. So when you are time to retire, you'll have that money available, and it won't be cut in half per se. Well, so let's talk about then, since we're on this topic. Now, I know I know there's like planners, coaches, advisors. What is the difference between like a financial advisor per se and a planner? What's the difference between that?
Absolutely. So one thing that's obnoxious about the financial advice industry is that there aren't really hard and fast rules for what you can and can't call yourself, right? Like in the medical field, for example, there are very specific titles that you can call yourself if you have that, and you can't just call yourself whatever you want, right? So if you're a nurse, you can't call yourself a doctor. If you're an oncologist, you can't call yourself an anesthesiologist, right? There are very specific titles, and only the people who earn those can use them, and they wouldn't use anything else other than their exact designation. And that doesn't really exist in our industry. Every once in a while they try to pass legislation to make that more uniform, and it gets shot down by the insurance lobbyists. So in general, though, there's like representatives, like financial representatives, financial professional, financial advisor, investment advisor, financial planner. There's a whole bunch of names that people might call themselves. I think in general, if someone is calling themselves like a financial professional or financial services representative, those ones I would just flat out not work with. Those are people for sure they just represent the companies of the products that they sell. And basically all products that are for sale are not the best products. So I would just avoid them entirely, right? So then the ones that you would be looking for would be like financial advisor or financial planner. And I think generally the differences are that a financial advisor tends to just focus on like investments and insurance, where a financial planner would probably go further than that and be looking at like estate planning and tax planning and budgeting and a lot of the other aspects of financial advice and financial world. They would, same with like a financial coach, would also be probably closer to a financial planner than they would to like a financial professional. The main difference between like a financial coach and like a financial planner is that financial advisors and planners and stuff, they are licensed to actually give specific investment advice. So you do need to be licensed with the state or with the federal government to do that. Whereas a financial coach usually isn't licensed to do that. So they can give you really good advice on basically everything else other than exactly what investments you should choose, right?
Yes.
And so they, you know, so that can be, and then usually they'll spend more time on like budgeting and some of those other things, which honestly are just like core foundational stuff that everyone should be doing. And so my preference would honestly usually be that people work with either a financial coach or a financial planner. For sure, avoid like the financial professionals or the financial representatives. And financial advisors, such a broad term that you really have to dig into that, I think, to find out exactly what kind of professional you're dealing with.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm with you on that. Financial coach, they kind of, and they give you the basics, right? They start with the basics and they build up from there. So yeah, that's some definitely good recommendations. So I know too, Freeman, there's also different options when it comes to investments, and I know there's some differences between certain types of investments. So, and I know, and I was looking at this, and it says something about investment and investor return, right? So what are the difference between those two, investment and investor return?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I think we mostly, when we're talking about investments and like the money you can make with them, we're mostly talking about investment returns, right? Like you can find like a Vanguard S&P 500 index is a fund that tracks the 500 largest companies as measured by the Standard & Poor's 500 index. And so, you know, you can look at that and, hey, over the last 10 years, it has averaged 12% or something like that, right? So you can look at and see what has this investment done over time. And that is almost always way different than the actual returns that actual investors that we as people are actually getting. Because most people don't stick, you know, if you're measuring the investment returns of a fund over 10 years, most people haven't owned a fund for 10 years.
Yeah,
they switch out of their funds all the time. They're constantly switching strategies. They look at their 401k options. They see that the ones that they are in are not the best ones. And so they switch over to the best ones. And they're constantly moving around, moving money in and out of the market, doing all these things. And so that their returns are often far less than the returns of the actual investments that they're trying to invest. And there's this company called Dalbar that measures this over time. Every year they look at the new data and they run like rolling 5, 10, 20, 30 year things. And they find that, you know, like the S&P 500 has averaged around 10% over any 10, 20, 30 year length of time. But the average investor has done closer to like 6 to 8%, depending on the time period that you're measuring. And the difference between that, right, is that if you have you know, $10,000 that you invest for 30 years and you just left it in the S&P 500, or if you were an average investor and you measured like what they were doing, the average investor would take that $10,000 and they would turn it into $60,000 over 30 years, which is not bad, right? Start with 10, you get up to 60. That's 6 times the return over that time. That's not bad, right? That's way better than a bank, better than CDs, all these things.
And that's without adding any funds to that $10,000.
Yep, just the original $10,000, right? But if you would literally just put it in the S&P 500 and done nothing to it over that same 30-year time period, that $10,000 would turn into $200,000. And so the average investor would have made it to $60,000, and the investment would have returned to $200,000. So the average investor is literally losing out on tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime just by messing around with it. Because we know what the investments do. They do. It's all posted. You can find that stuff anywhere. It's way harder to measure what your actual return is to do that. And the way that I look at it, there's 4 main reasons why the average investor doesn't do as well as the market itself. We call them the 4 horsemen. Okay. The first one is chasing return. And that is where you're constantly trying to move your money around to get it into the best fund, right? You look at your returns, they're not amazing. You look at other options in your 401k and you move them into those ones only to have those ones underperform. It's kind of like Like, if you've ever been stuck in traffic, right?
Yeah.
And you're driving in the right lane and you're seeing all these cars in the left lane and they're passing you and you're like, what the heck? And so you're looking over the shoulder looking for a gap and you veer into the left lane and you're like, I made it. And then just as you do that, that left lane comes to a halt and the lane you were just in starts going, right? Every time. And so I don't know if you're like me, but you start like tracking, like, okay, I was right behind that ice cream truck, and now it's way up there. Oh, now I'll track this dump truck. Oh, now it's way up there. And that's exactly what we're doing, right? You're constantly trying to get the next best return. And by doing that, by constantly jumping around, you're usually buying in to other funds or other strategies right at their peak, only for them to come back down to earth. And you're jumping out of a fund that's in a temporary lull only right before it then takes off and goes without you. And so, I don't know if you've ever been stuck in traffic or done any of those things to your own returns, but it's a very human thing to do, right?
Yeah.
That's the first one, right? That's a good way to lose your shirt especially over decades, right? The second one, this horseman's got two swords, right? And one is under diversification and one is over diversification, right? The first one being that you have, all your eggs in one basket. You have a bunch of money in your own company stock or in Bitcoin or something else, and then it tanks, and you're not spread out, and you have way too much risk, and you lose a bunch of money because you were trying to make a killing on something, but instead you got killed by it. And so a lot of people are under diversified, but you can also be over diversified, and that's where, and we see this a lot with people who do work with not great financial advisors, that you look at their statements and they have like 23 funds in their Roth IRA. And so they think that they're really, really well diversified. And they're like, oh, this is amazing. Look at all these funds. Look how complicated. Look at all these great things my advisor is doing for me. This is awesome. Like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand it. But if there's so many funds, it's got to be good, right? And if you look under the hood of those funds, the top 5 holdings of like 70% of the funds are Apple, Google, Tesla, it's the same fund over and over and over again. But by spreading it out, it just increases the fees, it increases the complexity, it increases all these different things. And so you end up actually worse off having all those extra funds than if you just had a very simple but effective portfolio. Yeah. So you can be over diversified or you can be under diversified. Either one of those will chip away at your lifetime return over time. The third one we call timing the market, right? And that is where, as right, market goes up and down, usually up over time, but it'll have these big swings down, right? 2001, 2008, 2020 with the COVID crash, 2022 with the inflation Russia crash. I'm not sure what they're officially blaming it on, right? And there's some people that they look at it in hindsight and they may like, oh man, what if you could get out of the market when it was high and then get back into it when it was low? Like, wouldn't you just be way better off? And so these people are constantly trying to get out of the market when it's good and try to get back into it when it's bad and all these things. But the problem with trying to do that is you have to be right twice, right? You have to be right when you get out and you have to be right when you get back. And so we most recently saw this a bunch with people who right, COVID happened, S&P 500 goes down 35% in 33 days, right? Fastest market drop in history. A bunch of people, even people who pulled out right at the beginning or not too far down, they're like, oh man, even if you timed the first part, right? You got out at the right time. You got out at the peak before it crashed. A lot of people did. But the problem is like it rebounded so fast that most people didn't get back in, right? And then a lot of them thought, oh, it's gonna be a W recession. It's gonna go down again. Don't worry. But it just kept going up and up and up and up. And even when it went down in 2022, it never got anywhere close to those pre-COVID highs. And so anyone who got out at the right time, but didn't get back in at the right time and are still on the sidelines have lost out on thousands and thousands. And so that's a losing game, man. Almost nobody can do that, and no one can do it consistently. And you'll find people who, man who called the 2008 crash as another great prediction, or something. Like, there's all these people that maybe they did it right once and now they think they can consistently do it. But it's like people who win once the first time they go gambling, they win, and now they think they're going to win every time they go gambling. And that's just, the house always wins, man. It doesn't work that way. So timing the market, that's the third one. And then the last one is just plain good old fashioned panic. Right. It's usually preceded by euphoria. Yeah, you're really excited about the market. Things are looking awesome. They're going up and up and up and up. And so you finally decide, hey, this would be a good time to get into Bitcoin or to get into the market or get into whatever else. And people buy in at the highs. They're all excited about it. And then it crashes and the market's going down and down and down. The life savings go down and 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 down. And they just can't take it anymore. And they're like, I got to stop the bleeding. I will pull out, and once all this stuff settles down, then I'll get back in. And so they panic, they pull out at the bottom, the market comes back without them, and they're stuck down at the bottom, and they lose any chance they have of. And people do it all the time. and they lose, it takes them 30, 40 years of earning, saving up from their retirement. It goes down by 30% in COVID. They pull out at the bottom. It goes out without them, and they wiped out the last decade of their earnings in one move. And so like part of my job then is not to pick the next hot stock, because no one can do it, or to tell you when the market's going to crash next, because no one can do that, or to tell you what sector, what growth fund or whatever else is going to be the next best sector to be in. No one can do that consistently. Right. My job is to help people to invest properly and to stay invested and to avoid those four things, because you can save perfectly for 29 out of 30 years. But if in 1 year you panic out of the market, you can undo decades of saving, right? And if I can keep someone from just once in their lifetime losing 30% of their money, right, that will pay me to work with them for their entire life, let alone all the additional stuff that we'll be doing for them and saving them taxes, other things. So, if anyone's been listening to those, like usually when I tell the story, when I walk through this, I usually will get a nod or a certain like, oh yeah, from someone like, oh, talk about this in a client meeting or whatever. And usually there's at least one like, oh yeah, I did that, And so, right, that's just part of what we do. Then it's just, okay, you did it before. Let's just make sure you never do it again, right? And this sounds great. And maybe there are people who are listening to this and like, oh yeah, that sounds amazing. That sounds like something I should be doing. And you're not going to remember this 5 years from now, right? When the next big thing happens. And so that's, again, right, listening to podcasts, listening to books, working with someone, being reminded more often than you're taught of these things, so that when that thing threatens you the next time, you remember it when you need to remember it, and not just when you're driving in your car listening to the Money Talk podcast.
Yeah. And what's kind of funny, because when you was giving the first example, and I could see myself in traffic, because I do that too. It's like, oh, that line's moving faster than this line. Let me get over. You get over. Yeah. Oh my God, that was a great example. That was a great example.
Yeah. Who can't relate to that, right? Everybody's been there.
Oh, absolutely. I was just there. Oh my goodness. So you mentioned something about tax and about saving on taxes. Could you kind of talk a little bit about that? Because everybody, if you know anything about taxes, everybody would like to kind of save on taxes. So could you talk a little bit about saving on taxes?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's like, well, I'll often ask people, hey, what's your biggest expense in life? What do you spend the most on? And most people will say their house, right? That's the first thing that jumps to mind. But that's not true. For most people, taxes is the number one expense that they'll have over the course of their life, right? Because even a house, as expensive as they can be, and I just moved, and so like I'm totally aware of how expensive houses can be. Eventually, you pay it off, and then you don't pay it anymore, but you will always pay for your entire life. So that's your largest expense. So anything you can do to reduce that is just money back in your pocket, right? And so, most people, they only think about taxes once a year when they have to file them, and they do it themselves with TurboTax, or they hire a CPA or something to do it. And when you do that, right, you are either the software or your CPA. What they're doing is they're trying to find deductions and credits and whatnot to save you on taxes last year, right? When we filed in spring of 2024, we were filing taxes for calendar year 2023. So we're looking last year, how do we save tax? Which is a bit like driving by trying to look through your rear view mirror and looking backward, right? And so one of my jobs then as a tax planner, not just a tax preparer, is to look that out of the windshield and to be less concerned about how much in taxes you're going to pay or save last year, and how much are you going to pay or save over your lifetime, right? And what are some things that we can do today to reduce not just 1 year's tax bill, but to reduce your lifetime tax? And that's really where a lot of the forward planning and thing comes, and strategizing as to what retirement account should we be putting to, right? I've got a 401k. I know they have a Roth option. Should I be doing traditional 401k or Roth 401k, right? That's a tax planning question. The effect of that is going to be the total amount of tax that you pay over your lifetime, right? Should I be doing Roth conversions now? Should I, what kind of investments in my brokerage account should I choose? What's the most tax advantageous ones for my tax bracket, et cetera? And so those are the things where that's part of our job, right? Is to say like, hey, look, everyone pays taxes, and we're going to pay Uncle Sam every dime that we owe him, but let's not leave him a tip along the way, right? What are some things that we can do? And it may be proactively paying a little bit more taxes now. As much as everyone wants to save taxes today, right? And we're all very short-sighted by nature. If I can say, hey, look, we might have to write the IRS a check for $10,000, but if it saves you $50,000 over your lifetime, is that something that you're willing to do, right? And planning out, showing people how to save on lifetime taxes, showing the impact of that. Some of those things are just the real, just meat and potatoes of overall financial planning, and seeing people see how much that they can save over a lifetime is a pretty fun.
Yeah, because tax is always a challenge if you're not careful.
Yeah.
It could eat up a lot of your revenue if you're not careful. You're right. So now I know too, because we were talking about some investments and stuff like that. And I threw taxes in there because you said something that kind of said, "Hey, how do you save on taxes?" But if you were an investor, right, and you was starting to invest in the stock market, could you talk about like the stock market versus bonds, and then what would you invest? What type of investment, or what would you invest in the stock market versus a bond? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest impact on what you should be invested in is when you need the money back.
Okay.
That's the biggest determinant of how you should be invested. So if we're talking, hey, how do I invest my money over the next 3 months? Because in 3 months I need it for a down payment on a house. That's going to be way different than, hey, how should I invest my money for retirement? And I'm not planning to retire in 30 years. Or again, which a lot of people don't think of, hey, I just retired, but I still need money for 30 years. How do we invest that? And if it's anything long-term, right, 5+ years, then we teach that people should put all of it into stocks, into equities, not into bonds. And the way that I like to think about it, right, and we actually use the phrase equities more than stocks, because I think when we think of investing in the stock market, it's kind of this nebulous, scary thing, and we think of, bunch of dudes in suits on the New York Stock Exchange, like waving sheets and yelling buy and sell and all this stuff, right? And like, who knows what the stock market really is? So I don't like calling it stocks or the stock market. I prefer to call them equities, and it means the same thing as stocks. But when I think of equity, I think of like the equity in my home, right? Or the equity in your home. And that is when you buy a house, right? You take out a mortgage, and so the bank kind of mostly owns most of your house. But as you pay that down, you're increasing the equity or the ownership in your home. And when you finally pay that thing off, you now have 100% ownership or 100% equity in that home. So equity just means ownership. And when we think of them as equities instead of stocks, I think it breeds up just this idea of ownership, that when you are invested in stocks or invested in equities, you really are co-owners of the best businesses in the world, right? If you own Apple stock, or you own the S&P 500 index fund, which has Apple stock in it, you are a co-owner of Apple, which means that when you buy a new iPhone, some of the profits that Apple is earning from you buying a new iPhone is ultimately coming back to you as the owner. Now, that's not an excuse to go out and buy a new iPhone every year, right? Because it's a very small percentage. But overall, right, what would you rather do? Would you rather lend money to Apple in terms of buying a bond, or would you rather be an owner of Apple itself?
Absolutely,
right?
owner.
And that's the real difference, right? When you buy bonds, you are loaning to the government or loaning to a company. And when you buy equities, you are an owner of the. And if you look around, even locally, right, wherever people are listening to this, wherever they live, if you look at the people in your neighborhood, in your community that are the wealthiest, they're business owners. They own businesses. They own things they have great employees. They make a great product or service. They serve the marketplace. They do it well. They do it with integrity. And they make a really good money being a business owner. And not everyone can go out and start a business. Not everyone's entrepreneurial, right? But we can all be business owners by owning stock, by owning equities. And the best thing is you don't have to do anything. You don't have to run it. You don't have to hire and fire anybody. You have people for that, right? We'll have my people call your people. My business owners will call your business. Like, they'll deal with all that. You just get to sit back and enjoy the rewards. And there's 2 ways that you make money then. As business owners, you make money when the company makes money, and they pay out those profits in the form of dividends. And most of the time, you take those dividends and you turn right back around and you buy more ownership shares in the same business or in other business. And then you also make money when the value of that company increases, right? When there's appreciation in that stock price. And so, some people owned Apple back when it was small, and now it's huge. And if they owned it that whole time, their ownership share in that company has grown the same proportion that Apple has grown. And now that means that when the businesses go through things or the economy goes through things, you, like any business owner, have to absorb that, right? Leaders eat last. The business owners are the last ones to get paid. So when the value temporarily goes down, your value in those companies goes down as well. But the only way you lose money, and I'm very strict on this with my clients when they say, oh, you know, the market's gone down, I've lost money. No, you haven't lost any money unless you sell.
That's right.
The only way to lose when the market is down is to sell when the value of your shares are down. Just like, you know, if I buy my house at X, it kind of appreciates to Y. And then if there's a big problem in my neighborhood or whatever, it might go down temporarily, but I don't lose that money unless I'm forced to sell at that point. If you hold on to it, the values come back. You know, the business, they're going to make the changes they need to make. They're going to pivot. They're going to sell a new product. They're going to drop one. They're going to cut some employees and hire some other ones. They're going to do what it takes to be successful. And eventually they will get through that, and those values will come back as well. So locally, right? When you look around at your community and you're going through a hard time in your local economy, when you look around at the successful business owners in your community, are they all rushing to sell their businesses as soon as the going gets tough? No. Business owners don't sell their businesses when the going gets tough. Business owners only want to sell their businesses when they're very successful, because that's how you get top dollar for them, right?
That's right.
And so when you have that mentality, that business owner mentality, you know, as long as you can stick with it through the thick and thin, you know, that's why we say, like, hey, if it's 5+ years out that you're investing for, then I'm not recommending this to your listeners, right? Because I don't know them. I don't know their situation. I'm not giving you investment advice, disclaimer, all that. But what we tell our clients is that you should be a 100% business owner, to be the owner not the loaner to the best. Nice.
I like that. I like what you said, to be the business owner to the best businesses in the world. I like that. Yeah. So Duke, based on all of our conversation and all of this wonderful information that you have provided, Freeman, to wrap it all up into like a nice gift with a bow on top, what last advice would you put out to the listeners that would be some golden nuggets? Just a couple of things that you would consider golden nuggets.
Yeah, good question. I would say, you know, you can't do anything right with money unless you know what you're doing, right? And personal finance is not a required class in high school or college or anywhere else. You know, I was required to take a lot of dumb classes in high school and college that I will never use again. But the one class that we would have used every single day, personal finance, is not required, right? And so in some ways, we're not responsible for how financially illiterate we are as a nation. But in other ways, we got to take ownership and learn for ourselves. And so the first thing, you know, learn about finances, because when you know what you're doing, you can save and make a lot more money than when you don't. And if you don't want to learn it all yourself, then hire someone who does know all that stuff, and just make sure you hire the right person, right? So learn and understand things. But then secondly, you got to act, right? You got to do something. And so if all you ever do is listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks, nod along with people, hey, this sounds like great stuff, but you never do anything, doesn't mean anything, right? If knowing were enough, we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs, right? We know what to do, but we don't do it. And sometimes doing it's really hard. Sometimes just that inertia of actually doing things. Sometimes the great idea strikes when we're driving or when we're, you know, mowing the lawn or something, and we don't act on the moment, and then we forget about it. But, you know, you have to actually save. You have to actually open those accounts. You have to actually research a good financial planner, fee-only fiduciary, obviously. You have to actually do some of these things, right? You got to hire a financial coach to coach you in these things. When they tell you to do something, you have to actually do it. And I think for a lot of people, like, what is it then? What is that disconnect between knowing and doing, knowing and acting? And for me, I think it's belief, that when you just know, you can know something, but if you don't believe it, you won't act, right? And I used to think that knowing was more important than believing, right? I would say, well, like, hey, some people believe in God, but I know God exists, you know. And I thought like that was the hierarchy for me at first, and then I realized, no, it's the other way around. You can know a lot of facts, right? I could have just said, you know, when you asked me about bonds and stocks earlier, I could have just said, oh, invest in stocks, they're better. Okay, now you know. Are you going to go do that? Are you going to go switch your portfolio from bonds? No, because you know a fact. Good for you, right? But maybe by telling the whole business owner equity story, it helped some listeners actually start believing that stocks were better than bonds, that equities were better than bonds. And so that's where, to me, right, maybe one of the actions you need to take is to subscribe to this podcast and keep getting good content from here. Maybe one of the action items is to go listen to my podcast. So that way you keep not just learning it the first time, but reinforcing it and building that belief so that you eventually do act, and that you stay acting on the things that you should be doing, right? That you get on the path and then stay on the path to ultimately financial freedom and wealth, or whatever your end goal is. So know and understand, believe, act. That, I think, is kind of the trifecta of good financial.
I like it. I like it. Freeman, that's awesome, because it kind of reminds me of I'm sure you heard the saying, knowledge is power, but I like to say the application of knowledge is power, because
Absolutely.
you might get the knowledge, but if you don't apply the knowledge, like you said, the action piece of it, then it's just knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So I like that. Thank you for that, Freeman, and for all of your great conversation here on the Money Talk. Listeners, this was a absolutely awesome time with Freeman. And I would tell you, when you get opportunity, just continue to soak in all of this good information that he's provided during this interview. And listen, if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back again with more great content from the Money Talk. Until next time, God bless, and keep listening to the Money Talk.